I would like to welcome our Kent community to our third community conversation. Today, you'll be hearing from my team about some of the key priorities in the district going forward. And we are very interested in the input that you have for us moving forward. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Wade Behringer. Wade?
Thank you, Israel. Welcome, everybody. Thank you again for joining us this morning for our third of our 3 community conversations. Before we get started, just wanted to share a few housekeeping items with everyone. So during our presentation, if we could have everyone keep themselves on mute unless we get to the question and answer section and you want to be able to answer a question. Also, if you are Zoom savvy, feel free to change your display name to include your organizational affiliation or where you're from. Again, welcome to our community conversations. For those that are not able to join us and want to review the conversation this morning, this meeting is being recorded to share with the KSD community on our website. We'll have 3 short presentations this morning. School boundaries, educational programs and operations, our EPO 2023 replacement levy, and our superintendent search. After our third presentation, we'll have time to take questions from the audience. You'll have an opportunity, probably about 30 minutes. You can raise your hand using the reactions button or submit questions via the chat, and we'll work through those questions and provide responses as we are able throughout the remainder of our community conversation. In addition, we're compiling frequently asked questions, and we'll post those questions and answers on our website. And if you have additional questions or comments after this morning's conversation, you'll have a link in the chat that you can refer to. It's one of our Microsoft forms that you can put comments and questions in that will be submitted to us. The form will close on Tuesday, November 9th by 11 p.m. So opportunity for you to share not only this morning, but after today as well. So with that said, we're going to get started. I'd like to introduce our Interim Chief of School Operations and Academic Support, Mr. Randy Heath, who's here to share information about our boundary process. Randy?
Thank you, Dr. Behringer. This is welcome everyone on this lovely Saturday morning, coming out for our final community conversation. And we're going to jump into some information about the boundary. First, a little bit of history. This is this whole process actually started last school year, in which time the Kent School District contracted with an outside firm, MGT, to conduct a boundary study and to make recommendations for the board. There's been some questions around whether MGT is still involved in the process at this point. They've given us the information, they've made their recommendations, and then we now have that information and we are doing our own. So MGT is not involved with us this year. There were several focus groups that were part of the recommendations that were made. There were discussions with district stakeholders to understand priorities of the study. Also, there were public comments sought throughout that process last year through thought exchanges, surveys, online community forums, and a number of recommendations were brought to the school board last year. And the school board decided to move forward with one of the top priorities, which was to create a enrollment for River Ridge Elementary, which is our newest elementary that was opening this fall. And that entailed the change to 7 existing elementary schools boundaries, and you can see those listed there. Also, as part of this change in creating and opening this new school, Kent Valley Early Learning Center, which previously held the kindergarten classes of Neely O'Brien and Kent Elementary, were returned back to their boundary schools this year, and Kent Valley Early Learning Center was closed. And then there was a number of concerns last year. A number of the schools that were impacted had dual language programs, and there was clear community input that we needed to have a priority for our commitment to those dual language students. And so we were able to, any student that was impacted, that was in the dual language program, that was moved to a new boundary school, we have been providing transportation for those students to remain in the dual language program. Next. Let's talk about the recommendations that were put on pause by the board last year. And those include the move of sixth grade students to our middle schools, which would, if we did that, that would entail the reopening of Sequoia Middle School as a new middle school. Just a reminder that the idea of that is to put them back into the former Phoenix Academy site. A reminder to the public that that actually has been functioning as a school pretty much ever since Sequoia was closed as a junior high, and therefore it is just minor changes away from needing to be or to being ready to house a middle school again. We're going to the recommendation is to create 4 feeder patterns, clear feeder patterns based on the comprehensive high schools. And what we mean by feeder patterns is that a designated number of elementary schools would feed into this particular middle school, which would then feed into a high school. Currently, right now, we have multiple elementary schools feeding into 2 or 3 different middle schools. And we have several of our middle schools feeding into two different high schools. And so this would make a clean, clear feeder pattern where they could follow along. And then the third priority really is about balancing enrollments, especially at our elementary schools. This creates equity, and we'll go more into that here shortly. So next, let's go dive deeper into the 6th grade at the middle school. So why is this important? Why are we looking to do this? We've had some questions around our boundary enrollment. Our enrollment as a district is down. So this is not necessarily a space issue as to why this is a priority for us. We are looking at this as a programmatic decision around moving 6th graders into the middle school, because we believe that this will set our students up for the best success possible. It is a priority for the district as it creates the most appropriate program, we believe, for 6th grade students. And here, some of the reasons for that is because state learning standards and assessments are structured on a K-5, 5, 6, 9, 12 level. So therefore, most of the curriculum that is out there is aligned with these 3 grade bands. And so having them aligned in the same schools, we believe, is important. We understand the importance of relationship building to all students, but especially for middle school age students. This relationship building is critical, and 2 years really does not allow for meaningful development of these relationships. Kids are transitioning in that first year and then immediately transitioning out the next. This would allow for a 3-year development of relationships and build a real leadership structure among our own students and improve school culture, we believe. Developmentally, 6th grade students align more closely with 7th and 8th graders than they do with kindergarten through 5th grade students. So remember, at the elementary currently, we have kids that are in 6th grade that are interacting with kindergarten students and 1st and 2nd grade students. And so we feel like it would be more appropriate for them to be at the 6th grade level. This also opens up some additional, the move would allow some additional access to electives and maybe upper level math and science that maybe wouldn't be available at the elementary schools. And so for all these reasons, we believe, plus we are like one of the only districts left in the state of Washington that has a structure of a K-6 elementary school. This would align us to our neighboring districts. And so when we transition kids between the districts, that will help. Okay, let's move on to the next one, the feeder patterns. Creating 4 feeder patterns, we believe is very helpful in creating this clear feeder pattern that allows students to stay together basically from K through 12 if they remain in the same neighborhoods. And so they will know when they enter elementary school, well, I'll be going to this middle school and I'll be going to this high school. And right now we have some problems, especially when kids transition and kids split up and go to different middle schools or different high schools. There are peer group friendships and others that have been developed, and sometimes that causes concerns for students and parents when transitioning from one level to the next. It also allows for greater, continuity in our sports, our music, our art, band, extracurricular clubs, in that they could, the high school band teacher, for example, would know that they need to work with these two middle schools in order to transition those students into their band coming the next year. Allows for clear transitions between those levels. So we just talked about one of those transitions, but there are multiple different transition areas that could be done if it was a clear feeder pattern. The middle school principals would know exactly which elementary principals they would need to start meeting with early in the year, start planning intentional transition activities between those levels so that kids have the smoothest transition possible. Things around behavioral expectations, things around, what it looks like, school-wide culture. Those can be built together within a strand and help for those transitions. Educational programs can be distributed equally into those 4 high school feeder strands, resulting in more equitable access if we create these strands there. And it allows this vertical planning that goes on. Right now, our principals meet regularly amongst like the elementary principals, the middle school principals, the high school principals. This would allow, say, the feeder span principals all to have regular meetings and talk about those transitions, talk about the vertical alignment of the curriculum, talk about how do we create a system all going toward the graduation at the feeder high school. And finally, the third recommendation is around creating enrollment, balancing enrollment, especially at the elementary level, to create this level of equity. Currently, right now, what we would like to get to a spot where every elementary building has the capacity to house the specialized programs that are needed for that neighboring area. So, for example, our highly capable program and our inclusive education program, sometimes we are having to put specialized programs into buildings where there's physical space, not necessarily in the neighborhoods where most of the students in the program actually attend. We would like the flexibility as the students in the program change to be able to move programs from one location to the other to help serve kids as close to their neighborhood school as possible. And this would also reduce transportation time that those students would spend on buses getting to those programs. And the greater space within all of our elementaries allows us to be less reliant on portable classrooms, trying to get as many of the classrooms inside the school building as possible, and then use those portable buildings for enrichment or other activities. And then greater space allows for the district to explore more options with our community partners in terms of early childhood education, in terms of daycare before and after school. If we had physical space on our elementary campuses, we could make some more meaningful relationships with our community partners to provide those options for our families.
All right, thank you, Randy. Again, if our audience has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, or you can, of course, wait until a question and answer session at the end. This time, I'd like to introduce our Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Jill Harmon, who's here to share some information about our upcoming EP&O levy. Dr. Harmon?
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Behringer. Good morning, community. I'm excited to be here to talk about our levy campaign coming in 2022. And as the slide states, when our schools are strong, our communities thrive. Excellence is one of our 3 core values in Kent School District. And student excellence is a balance of rigorous academic programs, social and career readiness skills. And we are fortunate in Kent School District to have a community who has supported that and expected that through their levy authorizations over time. We are currently living in our most recent levy authorization of our community, and that expires in December of 2022. Levies run on a calendar year basis, but because our school years operate splitting 2 calendar years, so the fall, the late summer and fall of 1 calendar year, and then the winter and spring of the next calendar year. This current levy will expire in the middle of the school year. And when we start our budgeting process in the spring, we need to know what our community is authorizing for us and what kind of educational program they expect. And so to that end, we are going to talk more today about that levy, what it covers, and what our plans are moving forward. So the Educational Programs and Operations Replacement Levy that we are planning will be on the ballot in February of 2022. We're proposing a 2-year cycle, so it would be for the calendar years of 2023 and 2024. The amount we're asking for from our community is $76.25 million. That is a continuation of the current amount that our community has authorized in our current levy. And that relates to $1.88 per $1,000 of assessed value for our taxpayers. So what does the levy cover? Levy funding allows us to provide a quality of education our community expects for the children of Kent School District. And that goes above and beyond what's funded by the state. So our levy funds, our educational programs and operations levy funds, everything that the state does not fund, including smaller class sizes, career readiness, opportunities for students, additional efforts in student safety, student health service investments, athletics and extracurricular activities, and fine and performing arts. So what specifically do we mean when we say smaller class sizes? We know that state funding is not sufficient to provide what is expected for students in Kent School District. So our EP&O levy currently allows us to pay for approximately 150 additional basic education teacher funded positions beyond what the state covers. It also allows us to provide opportunities for students to take advantage of STEM-related experiences, STEM-related preparedness opportunities, especially when living in Kent and attending Kent School District. You have the opportunity to have 2 very large corporations who are STEM focused right in their backyard. So we have Boeing and Blue Origin. And so having our students be prepared to have adult and life opportunities to live, work, and play in the town where they've grown up, in the area where they've grown up, and continue to contribute and be prepared to live successfully is important and a value. And we continue to fund that through our levy supports. Well before COVID, our community felt that it was important to invest in health for our students and health and safety awareness. Currently, the state only funds 4 nurses for our entire Kent School District. Our EP&O levy at the rate that is currently authorized, the $76.25 million, and what we're asking to continue moving forward, employs about 17 nurses not funded by state funding. Additionally, there is our student safety investments. Again, the state does not fund a level of student safety that our community expects for our students. The state funds a little less than 5 positions related to that. And we currently budget for about 12. So there are additional positions paid for out of a levy regarding student safety, in addition to safety camera equipment and those kinds of pieces that keep our students and staff safe while with us during the day. Levy also supports the extracurricular activities in athletics. We know that some of that is funded and supported through ASB fundraising, but that does not cover all the costs. And in order to support that for our students, Basic Ed does not fund that. We fund that out of a levy support there to continue those programs. And last but certainly not least, our arts performance, our arts and performing arts investments are not provided by the state, are not provided for by the state at all. We continue to support those and provide those fundings necessary for our performing arts centers and those operations through our levy investments. So this is very key. So we have 2 external, essentially credit rating agencies that rate not just Kent School District, but other districts, other businesses globally. And one of those is Moodys. And according to Moodys, we have a AA3 rating, and that just means that we are secure financially, we are stable financially. The quote there just talks about our ability to address previous financial challenges and situations, but continuing to deliver strong financial results as we move forward, managing not just the state money, but our community taxpayer money through our levy investments. So what does this mean if you are a taxpayer? It means that what we're talking about moving forward is no increase in the overall tax rate. That blue bar to your far, or the mixed bar to your far right, represents what we're proposing moving into 2023. And our current rate is $3.83 overall, and that's what we're expecting to continue moving forward for the next 2 years in 2023 and 2024. But the overall tax rate is composed of 3 different smaller tax rates. One of those is our materials and operations, our EP&O levy, and that's in that royal blue color. That's the $1.88 per thousand of assessed value that we're talking about. The other portion is our capital facilities and technology levy. That's the light blue portion, and that's 73 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And then there's our bonds, and our bonds are for supporting our buildings and structures there. And that's $1.22 moving forward is what we're proposing. And so the overall tax rate remains the same for our taxpayers, and that allows us to continue to provide the same level of academic rigor, social emotional experiences, extracurricular experiences for our students in Kent School District. So how does that $3.83 overall of assessed value compare when we're talking about other school districts in the region? And so what you're looking at here are other school districts across South King County. And what you see is that the middle bar, the center bar, $4.31 overall of assessed value is the average for those other districts when looking at their rates. And what you see just to the right of that is Kent School District's $3.83. So we are nowhere near the top of what other districts are asking regionally of their communities, but we're far from asking the least amount either. So we're sitting just below the average, but we're able to provide a program that our community is supportive of, that they expect, and that provides our students and allows our students to be prepared for life outside and after. So this chart here is looking at just the educational programs and operations levy. So the portion that we're going out for in February of 2022. So where does our amount sit in comparison to other school districts? As you see again, that we're sitting not near the top, but also not at the bottom either. And so as we move forward, we're just emphasizing that we're asking for a flat amount, a stable amount for our taxpayers, for our schools to support. We're talking about continuation of our programs and supports for our students moving forward, and that will sustain us through the calendar year of 2024. And then what you see here are just the dates of the process as we move forward. And so as we go forward, our last day to file with King County to place this ballot on the measure, to place this measure on the ballot is December 10th. And then there are the portions that go with the statement that we provide to our taxpayers, the pamphlets that go out, the communications that are required, and then the ballot that voters will receive in their mailboxes, and then due dates for those ballots to come back and for results to be certified.
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. Appreciate the audience members putting questions in the chat. And our last topic, we'll come back to Dr. Harmon. He's going to share some information about our upcoming superintendent search process.
So good morning again. I am here to talk to you a little bit about some actions that our board of directors have taken around identifying a permanent superintendent for Kent School District. On October 27th, during the regular meeting, our board took action to put out a request for proposals for consulting services to assist with the superintendent search. And so that RFP is currently active. It will close on Monday, November 22nd at 2 p.m. And that is when all proposals are due back. And once those proposals are returned, our board directors will review those proposals to identify a corporation that will assist with the process of helping look for a superintendent. And that process entails a couple of things. Finalizing the details of the timeline for that search, but it also includes engaging the community and identifying characteristics of a superintendent. It also engages the community in the process of how those candidates are presented to the community, and then assisting the board with the interview process and all of those pieces moving forward. As far as the RFP goes, once it is returned on the 22nd, our board will then take some time to review those proposals and identify finalists, corporations or individuals to assist with that process. Those finalists will be notified and they will provide and present an oral presentation on Tuesday, December 7th to discuss their work and their proposal for this work. And then once that happens, the board will make a final decision to offer a contract to support in the superintendent search. And then that process will begin with working with the board to develop a job description and all of those pieces, working with the community on characteristics, and then going through to the interview and selection process, with the board hoping to have identified a permanent superintendent by March 31st of 2022, and with that person's employment to begin on July 1st of 2022. And so this is the beginning of that process for Kent School District and its community, and our board will keep the community updated as the process continues. One thing that the board is interested in is how the community would like to be involved in that process. So what are some suggested ways that this consultant service can engage the community in how they would like to participate in this superintendent search?
Thank you, Dr. Harmon. All right, we are now at the time where we're going to open it up for question and answers. We've got about 30 minutes. I know that there's several questions in the chats, and I'm sure there's questions of those audience members who would like to raise their hand. If you choose to do that, just go ahead and click on the reactions button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It's the little head with the plus sign. I will call on you in the order that you raise your hand, and then feel free to unmute yourself, ask your question. And then when you're done, if you could lower your hand, that way we know that we've answered your question. And we'll go through this process for about the next 30 minutes, going back and forth between hand raising and chat questions. And we've got our team here to help support in responding to your questions. So this time, I'll look at any hands. I don't see any hands at this particular moment, but we do have questions in the chat. So I'm going to rely back on my team, Melissa. I think our first question is from Jenny Buren, 9:10 a.m.
I see that. Thanks, Dr. Berenger. So Jenny asked, how does moving 6th grade impact staffing? How does KSD plan to professionally develop current 6th grade elementary teachers into their new roles as middle level educators? And Chief West actually provided a response in the chat, which I'm happy to also read, which is that all KSD teachers are trained and design instruction in alignment with our instructional framework, CEL 5D+. This is foundational and required for all KSD teachers. This framework outlines the essential practices of educators, the logistics and operations pieces for our staff to transition from elementary to a middle school schedule happens at the building level. Professional development connected to content, pedagogy, curriculum will be provided by teaching and learning and supported with our school teams.
Thank you, Melissa. I'll just add to that piece in response. And just to clarify, if and when 6th graders move to middle school, the expectation is that 6th grade teachers are not necessarily just going to transition to 6th grade teachers in the middle school. Working with our labor partner, KEA, all teachers who will meet the requirements of being a sixth grade teacher in a middle school setting will have an opportunity to be a sixth grade teacher. So it could be a current first grade teacher who wants to teach sixth grade math or English. So it's not just a move of all sixth grade teachers to the middle school. There will be opportunities for other teachers who are currently teaching at all grade levels who meet the qualifications for that particular open position will have an opportunity to apply for that position. All right.
Thanks, Wade, for adding that. I can read the next question, also from Jenny. Where can community members see the data that shows how boundary changes impacts enrollment and space at each school?
Yes, I mean, the information from MGT from last year was put on our website and is available. Those numbers are being looked at by our research team and verified and connected to actual students that we currently have enrolled. And this information is being analyzed right now to try to make sure that the recommendations that were made still make sense. And if there's any tweaking that needs to happen to those, and then that will be shared at that time when we finish that work.
Thank you, Randy. I see Jenny has her hand raised, and since the last two questions were hers, Jenny, go ahead.
Hi, this is Jenny Buron. Going back to the staffing impact, I guess one of the things that I'm asking with that question is, if you take a sixth grade teacher or a sixth grade classroom where one teacher is providing content for reading, math, science, social studies, how does that translate? I mean, one person can only teach one thing. Obviously, you're going to need a ton more teachers when sixth grade goes up, and now that one teacher is only teaching English or math.
Yeah, I think the difference in a secondary model is that they may be just teaching math or just English, but they'll be teaching it multiple times a day. So there will not be a need for a large number of new staff. There will be some impact on that, but by and large, it's just more specializing. And to be honest, there are several of our elementary schools right now, especially in sixth grade, that are already kind of doing that. Like if you say you have three, or let's say you have four sixth grade teachers at a particular school, maybe two of them are taking and concentrating on the math and science, and the others are maybe concentrating on the English language arts and the social studies, and they're switching kids among them. So they're kind of doing a mini middle school model already. And so that is how that will most likely work at when we open up those new middle schools, if we do that.
That's
Okay,
correct,
thank you.
Randy. Yeah. I was just going to say that's correct. Just for a quick example, if you had 4 sixth grade teachers in one building and all 4 of them wanted to move to the middle school, as we're going through and identifying teachers to teach the various content areas in sixth grade at the middle school model, a teacher who may have taught the 5 or 6 or 7 content areas of the elementary school would need to choose. I'm going to be a sixth grade math teacher. I'm going to be a sixth grade English teacher, sixth grade social studies teacher. In the end, the number of teachers that will be needed for middle school will be able to meet the needs of the content areas that need to be covered at the middle school. So it should work out. I'm not saying that we won't need to hire potentially some additional teachers, but I would say for the most part, it should work. It's just the adjustment in our class size language within our contract for our teachers. Okay. Questions in the chat? Jennifer?
Thanks, Wade.
Mhm.
For the new middle school boundaries, are these the same as the plan proposed last year, or have they been relooked at? For example, the plan last year had kids who attend Carriage Crest and live in the Carriage Lane and Carriage Wood neighborhoods that are closer to Northwood attending Meeker, while students who lived farther away from Northwood who attend Lake Young's and Sue's Creek attending Northwood. This also made Meeker over capacity. Have these issues been looked at and changed?
Yes, so Just to let you know, so we went through a round of implementation of boundary decisions last year when we looked at the 7 elementary schools that that needed to be adjusted. And we learned some things through there. We learned around some things to do analysis of the numbers that were given by MGT to try to see, do they match up with our current enrollment? And so we learned some things during that time. We've already started the process, as I think I mentioned earlier, about really looking at some of those recommendations. And then we've also taken the comments that we received last year from the community in terms of, and Carriage would, the area that's spoken about in the comments there, is one of the areas that we are taking a closer look at and trying to determine if the recommendations that were made by MGT make sense, or should they be adjusted and a different plan brought to the board. So that is, to answer the question, yes, that is one of the neighborhoods that we're taking a deeper look into.
Thank you, Randy. Daniel, I see your hand raised for a question.
Yeah, hi there. Okay, Daniel Otinski. I'm a family practice physician at Valley Medical Center. And I'm also the father of 2 daughters at age 8 and 11 who are at Kent schools. First, I'd like to say I appreciate you guys having this discussion time, and especially on a Saturday, because it's really hard for me to make it on weekdays. So thank you for giving up your Saturday morning. And I guess for my credentials, like I've been doing my job for over 15 years now. So I've got the public health and safety hat on, as well as the father role. And I like that we're doing this because it shows we care about our kids and community. So I'm not trying to pick a fight here. I really do value that we can have this discussion. With that said, I have four points I wanted to make, questions. First thing, about the overcrowding. If I remember right from the MGT thing from last year, the survey, one of the issues was it would free up the shifting from 6th grade to middle school. It would free up a lot of room, and you gave some great reasons for advantages of that. It free up room in an elementary area, but then it would overcrowd the middle schools. And so it seemed like just kind of a shuffling of the deck chairs. And so I don't know if that's a win. Like, I don't want to do something just for the sake of doing it. Like, just moving the overcrowding doesn't seem great. So that was one question, is like, would it actually make it appropriate levels at appropriate staffing and space at every level? That's one. Two, there's a lot of research out there about moving kids from elementary school to middle school and what's the right time to do that. And I have some scholarly articles that kind of address the subject. And I know that, because you touched on it, that a lot of the local districts and other places have 6, 7, and 8 as a cohort. But I don't want to lose sight that our district, Kent, is totally different than most other districts in the country. Like, we have far more diversity, and it's a special place where we live. And so I don't know if mirroring those around us is the best idea, especially with so many immigrant families and not English as a second language. So is this move, it may be right for other communities, but it may not be right for us. If I put myself in a 6th grade immigrant mindset, it's going to be a lot easier for me to learn English, adapt to American culture in an elementary school setting than an adolescent, or than a middle school one. So just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean we have to do it too, I guess is the second point. And I know there's pros and cons to both sides. Third thing, one of my daughters has special needs, and there's no doubt that we as parents are going to do what we can to address them. But my hunch is, and I don't know because I only know the school they're in, is that the few kids out of the majority at each school that have special needs, they're likely going to be better served in an elementary setting than a middle school setting. I don't know. I don't have data to back that up. That's just my gut instinct as a parent. And so I don't want to forget those kids. And then fourth and final one, COVID safety. So thankfully, vaccines are coming out for the younger set now, which is great. Realistically, if we look at the big picture, COVID's still going to be an issue for probably another at least a year or two, who knows how long. And so masking is probably here for another year. What I found data-wise is that there are more outbreaks of COVID in middle schools than elementary schools. And so if we want to keep our kids in school and healthy, the elementary school environment is usually easier for that. Kids are more compliant with masking. There's less violence, there's less bullying, things like that. And so to keep our kids in school, it might be better to stave off any switch for another year or two, if at all. So I guess my question is, how are you guys thinking on the COVID lines for where our district is and where we're going to be in the next few years? I think that's it. I can stop
All
talking.
right. I think I've been keeping track of all those, but if I don't get to all of those, then please feel free. First off, I want to acknowledge what you said. You have some valid points, absolutely, and there are ones that we've considered ourselves. First off, just a little history on myself. I am a middle level educator from the very start. I spent 20 years in the middle schools at different districts, with different demographics, and in 6-12 and 6-8 structures. I was for a year, I served as president of the Association of Washington Middle Level Principals. So I've had conversations with middle level principals around the state. We've had lots of conversations around this. When done correctly with a middle school model that it takes into the developmental needs of middle school students, I strongly believe 6 through 8 is the place that kids can get their needs met the best. And I will say that when we poll our elementary and our middle school principals right now, who combine for generations of experience at the middle school level, it is universally almost as high as a recommendation as possible from those two, especially those two levels, that 6th grade is most appropriately, developmentally appropriate for the 6th graders to be at the middle school. But it's got to be done in a purposeful way and designed in a purposeful way to meet those needs. And so that is, one of the things that, will be part of this process will be, are we doing the proper transitions to get kids into middle school, and are we offering appropriate programs? And what that may mean is, like, the 6th grade within a middle school looks very different from maybe what it looks like in 7th and 8th as a way to transition students. So, it may be very much like a 6th grade. There's more supports and others that are in place then, and then you kind of wean off of those supports as you move along, and you truly transition those kids in middle school, so that then by the time they leave in 8th grade, they're ready to take on the role of high school, which is that. And I will say that, as especially as a middle school administrator, this is a difficult thing for 6th grade parents. There is a lot of concern, because they're taking a smaller environment where they know everyone, and they see their younger kids, and then they see them being put into this environment that can be a little scary. But there are ways that we can do that too, with conversations with parents and really understanding their concerns and really designing a program that works. So the overcrowding piece, that's one of the things we're looking at. We noticed some of those things. We for one thing, we can't move 6th grade to the middle school if we also don't back up the site of Sequoia, because then it really would be middle schools that are way too big. One of the things that's a little different between secondary and elementary is that kind of at elementary, teachers have set classrooms that are there throughout the day. When you have multiple classes being taught at the secondary level, there are other ways to kind of address sometimes larger numbers. And so we'll take that into consideration. And once again, we're re-examining the recommendations by MGT to see if the recommendations around the middle schools and the high schools were appropriate, and is there any adjusting that we can do to maybe even that out a little more. See, the COVID question, absolutely. We've been hearing that as well. And we really, when developing what the timeline will look for the implementation, that has been really important to hear from the community and to hear from our own staff who are saying, these are what the things that we're seeing. These are things and supports that we're putting into place. And, this would be an appropriate implementation guidelines if we go along this route. So given the current situations that we're in. So don't think that those are not part of the conversations that are happening right now, because they absolutely are. And then did I hit them all, or did I miss one?
Special needs kids. Yeah. I kind of touched on that.
Yeah, and special needs kids, it is the special needs students are directed by their individual education plans. And that is really looking at the individual needs and services those students need in order to access an appropriate and free appropriate public education. And therefore, the services that students at that particular school needs at the time are the ones that, will sometimes those services already exist at the school. Sometimes they need to be moved to a school when a student with a particular needs enter into that school. So we're always doing that examination when we're looking at how do we best serve all of our students, and especially those that have been designated as special education students.
And I guess finally, the diversity that our district has, and how we are different than everybody else in that regard. Sort of thoughts there.
I mean, we are, but we're also not, like I said, one of the districts that I was an administrator and a teacher in as a 6th grade was a very diverse district as well. And so I think, that is something to consider, but it is, I think all middle school, all 6th graders can thrive in this environment. But once again, if we design the program appropriate to meet the needs of the students that we serve, and that will definitely be part of the equation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Melissa, Roseanne Nelson has a question at 9:22
Got it.
in the chat.
Wait, for our Roseanne asked, for our kids that already attend Northwood as 7th graders, would they be grandfathered in and be able to stay at Northwood? In addition to their siblings, we have a 5th grader, or would they have to endure the transition of a new school, Meeker, for 1 year before high school?
First off, I just want to acknowledge that when districts embark on a boundary realignment, it can be difficult, for students, and that's why they don't happen very often. They happen every 10 to 12 years or so, generally, in a district. And so, while we will look at those options, sometimes that is not possible to grandfather students into remaining at a particular school. There is a transfer process that people can use, but we always have to look at space capacity. So for example, if we couldn't just do a blanket saying anyone who maybe was here already wants to stay, and then 150 of those students take that option, and now we don't have the space at that school to accommodate that. So we've always got to look at it as space availability piece, while at the same time offering options through our transfer process for those families. We had a group of families that experienced that this year in terms of the 7 schools that had their boundaries realigned. Some of those parents chose to apply for transfers and were granted those some of them were granted those transfers, some were not because there wasn't the space that was available at that time. But there is a process. It just can't be a guaranteed process necessarily that we're able to do that.
Thanks, Randy. The next question is from Jenny. Will the Tuesday, December 7th final proposal presentations from superintendent search organizations be made public?
So I believe it is the board's intention to have those oral presentations be made publicly to the board of directors. So those meetings are always with the board as audience, and the community and public have an opportunity to witness that. And so I believe that is the board's intention. However, there are certain components of the application review process, be it either for the contract, for the selection of the consulting company, or for the contract discussions for the superintendent selection, that legally can be held in private due to those the open public meeting law. There are exceptions to those certain pieces, especially around financial pieces or negotiation details there that can be discussed behind closed doors. But I believe it is the board's intention to have those oral presentations be made in the public. And I see Director Vangadaslam's thumb up, so I think I got that correct.
Thanks, Jewel. The next question is from Roseanne. There is big issue with bus driver shortage. My son had to stay at Carriage Crest School an extra 20 minutes yesterday because of no bus driver to take them home. Buses are picking up 2 routes and buses are maxed with kids. That is a health issue. This is a big concern. If our kids have to be bused several miles away to Meeker from our Carriagewood area, especially when we are walking distance to both Ridgewood and Northwood. Ridgewood was the boundary assigned to our area before the last boundary change. What about fixing the boundaries this side of 140th so our neighborhoods can be back to the Ridgewood school, which would resolve all these concerns?
Okay.
I was looking for the question. Sorry, Randy, to clarify.
So couple different things I want to unpack there. First off, I think we've shared that we are re-looking at all of those MGT recommendations and looking to tweak them if necessary. So yes, that is something we are looking at. The other thing I do want to mention is that we are very proud of our transportation department and have provided excellent service for many years. The bus drivers and transportation staff over there are working extremely hard this year. As you may have seen, other districts are also facing transportation concerns right now in terms of finding drivers. Anyone on this call, if you're interested in becoming a bus driver, if you know of anyone who might fit nicely into this category, we would love to help you, for you to help us be recruiters and try to find people to fill these positions. I think, you know, the pandemic has caused a lot of these staffing issues that are not unique to education or really even the school industry. We are hopeful that we will continue to, as we get further away from some of the immediate impact of the pandemic, that we will start to gather up and get more drivers, and that really won't be a concern in future years. So.
Thanks, Randy. The next question is from Lloyd, excuse me. What are the district's plans to address federally mandated transition services for 15 to 18-year-old special ed students in the high school setting? Additionally, how will the district address the overcrowding at top?
I can jump in and address the second question, the overcrowding at top.
Dr. Berenger, I think Danelle was answering. We just couldn't hear her.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
She muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning, KSD community members. Thanks for joining us for our third community conversation regarding levy and boundary issues and our superintendent search. So in regards to support for students who are served either through our top program, or some of those students are also served at their local high schools. So we are continuing to reevaluate like our data, look at our program model, and also look at how students are supported in person at our top facility, which of those students are supported by providing services off campus. So those are ongoing conversations that we have. As we review our data regarding our special education programs, we really are looking to have a tighter alignment of services in each of our feeder patterns.
And I was just going to add, thank you, Danelle, to the second part of that question is that is being looked at, and it is something that's been on our radar. That top is continuing to grow and getting bigger than the building they're currently in. And so that is definitely something that we're, as we move forward, going to continue to work to address. Obviously, this is a levy campaign and not a bond campaign, so we can't build another structure right now, but it is something that we definitely have on our radar for the future to address as quickly as possible as we're able to.
I can move on to
Stephanie?
the next question is from Stephanie. What are suggested supports that could be implemented for incoming sixth graders in middle school? And if we have staffing and support issues currently, how is that even feasible?
Yeah, there were honestly too many to list in terms of if you're really looking at that. And, I think that as in all supports, it is based on the data that we receive of what the supports are needed for that particular student. I think if we are moving forward with this boundary decision and deciding that the sixth graders are moving in, that's when some heavy duty work starts happening involving middle school staff, involving parents in the community that want to be involved in that process. It means involving our community partners that are currently serving our students and really bringing the group together and looking at the data about what are the current needs of our, what would be our fifth and sixth graders that would be moving, together in 1 year to a new middle school, and really designing those supports. And the first year of implementing this new sixth grade at the middle school would actually be kind of a unique year in that you would be transitioning 2 grade levels in at the same time. And so what it looks like that year will need to be different from what it will look like in following years when you're just transitioning 1. But just like in everything in education, and what it's taught us the last year and a half, 2 years, is that we need to be flexible as a system. And we need to collect data on what are the needs of our current students that are in front of us, and balance that with known structures that we know can happen all the time, but then also additional supports that might be needed for this particular year or this particular group of students that are transitioning in. So that's a process that schools are actually very good at and have gotten even better at this last school year.
Thanks, Randy. We've got a couple more questions, and if I read it quickly, maybe we can get through both.
Yep.
Will you be giving specific data on additional teachers and support staff, needed to hire for reopening Sequoia?
Absolutely. We are working with our human resources department right now to try to assess exactly, like we said earlier, a lot of the staffing as far as the instructional staffing will probably come right from the move from the elementary school, but there are additional support staff and other people that just are needed when you open up a new building. So that will be part of what is shared. Yes.
And then Linda asked, I noticed the boundary recommendations from last year showed the school student counts that were being looked at. It appeared that the special program at schools were not taken into account. For example, it didn't show the many highly capable students that attend Sunrise. Will those students be taken into account when looking at student counts?
Yeah, so the idea really is around trying to first balance based on where kids live in their neighborhoods, and make sure that that is a balanced piece there. And then we start looking at our specialized programs, like our highly capable and our some of our special education programs. And so then we start looking at who is being served in those schools, and then a decision is really made about where is the best location. When we create that capacity at all of our elementary schools, we can make decisions based on the students in the program at the time. And that is where we would like to get to a spot of doing.
Great.
Thanks, Randy. And I just want to acknowledge, I apologize, Mr. Lloyd, I called your first name Lloyd, but Dr. Behringer corrected me, it's Steve. And so names are important, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and apologize for that. But those are all the questions, Dr. Behringer.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, KSD team, for supporting responses. And thank you especially to our community members who joined us this morning and taking the time out of your morning to ask questions, to be here to listen to responses. Again, if you have any additional questions or comments that pop up after this morning, please feel free to access that Microsoft Forms document that is at the top of the chat. And it looks like Melissa, knowing Melissa, she's going to drop it right back in the chat again. But again, opportunities to reach out, please. Your voice is important as we go through this process.